We're going to talk about the pitfalls of remembering past lives. The live with as many people on my list. And if you could share the live, that'd be awesome. On my list. And if you could share the live, that'd be awesome. I'm going to use my husband as a very good example. And a lot of you are probably going to think it's woohoo. You're not going to believe it. And it's all good. Doesn't matter. What's important is how past lives can actually muzzle people remembering it worse, which is the opposite of what the purpose is. So on one of my Akashic readings, I told you that, not one, all of them so far have come back as starseeds, Andromedans, Pleiadians. I've yet to have a Sirian. But that's been like, the downloads were about how they fell. And with all of them, and Anunnaki, I remember. So Andromedan, Pleiadian, Anunnaki, and that means pretty much the same, but it means I don't know the planet. I don't know where they came from originally. But one of the famous lives that I did recently was the General Tomeli, which I've never, honestly, in all my years, I've never had a famous past life, of any renown. And General Tomeli was the most famous so far. And it came out of this very interesting, but not an expansive personality, meaning the personality of this woman is very shy. Not shy, but not grandiose and brash, which you would think would be the personality of somebody who came out as a Tomeli. So we have to understand that some of you do have past lives that were well known, right? But that's not the point of it. It's not going to get downloaded for you unless there is an important message. That's really, I can't tell you how many times I used to hear this in the 70s and 80s, how people kept claiming they were Cleopatra. Like, so much bullshit. That's not how it works. Very few of us will remember famous past lives because for some of us, it's really not important. And all it would do was throw us off the track of our progression, especially now during the ascension. So I'm waiting for people to get on. And this is going to be a quick live. And we're going to talk about my husband, who I never divorced, who passed in 2020. Now, my husband's father was a very well-known football player. And the reason why that's important is because he had inherited the genetics of a fucking incredible athlete. So he was 6'2", the biggest shoulders I've ever seen on a man, and the biggest hands. He could have been a wide receiver. He could have been all this shit. And he refused. He refused to do that. He was incredibly brilliant in taking an engine in a Corvette, 1959 Corvette, or Mustang 68, 60s, or Goat, and literally take it apart, put it back together with very little manuals, using any manuals, and just a brilliant mind, but never went into becoming a car mechanic. He could have worked on Ferraris and Porsches. He owned one, but he didn't. So when somebody doesn't want to win with gifts that they've been given from the universe, you understand? The gift of creating, taking an engine apart and putting it back together. It's not a small thing to do. It's pretty fucking intense. And all of these things I'm telling you, all of these gifts given you, you've got to start asking yourself, why don't you want to win? But that would have been a question very far removed from my consciousness in the 80s because I was 22, 23, 24. We met when we were 21. So in our 20s, we lived in San Francisco. He started having downloads that he was Hannibal Barca. Hence why my last name is Barca. That's another story for another show. And it was freaking him out because he couldn't figure out what if this was real or not. My husband, Nick, his name was Nick. Nick was a very humble man, very humble, a Leo, and he had the face of a lion. He was an incredible looking man, extraordinary face. And he started having those downloads, and me being psychic since I was, since memory, since I could talk. Didn't think much of it, only because I know anything's possible. That was always my attitude. And one day, he was sleeping. We were sleeping. It was nighttime. And apparently he was having sleep paralysis. And what he described was that he was on a slab, olive-skinned, on a slab, and he couldn't move. And he had a beard and a linen cloth across his hips, groin, to cover it. But it was as if he had died on the slab. And apparently he was trying to push his finger against me because he couldn't move, to push me to wake him up. He was terrified. He couldn't move and he couldn't speak. And then suddenly what woke me up was that I heard a voice, but I heard two voices, the voice of a woman and then his voice screaming. So I woke him up very gently, because I know that from experiences with sleepwalking, because my brother suffered from sleepwalking, is you don't wake him up immediately. You've got to gently touch them and gently bring them back into the present. And he was pissed off because he said, I've been trying to wait. I wanted you to wake me up. Well, what took you so long? And I said, well, what I heard was a scream, but it wasn't just yours. It was a woman's voice, and it was coming out of you. And it was as if two voices had merged and intertwined, like DNA strands, screaming. And the name of the woman, I asked him, do you know who this is? Emelise. Okay, Emelise. Interesting name. All right. And as we progressed through the day and the following week, we started talking more about, well, what downloads are you getting about you being this general, Hannibal? And he said, I just have these memories of I'm seeing myself talking to men. I'm seeing myself going into battle. I'm seeing all the carnage, all the shit I did. My God. And I was able to find 2 copies of the book Hannibal by Harold Lamb. Harold Lamb. We started reading it together. And we had read other books from Polybius on the Punic Wars and shit like that. Scipio Africanus, and who was trying to basically hunt down Hannibal, because Hannibal was doing his work and had crossed the Pyrenees, as you know, with the elephants. You guys know the story. There's a famous line as he's standing up with his men, and it's a ragtag team of men from different villages, different countries. He had gone through Spain, Italy. He's standing at the pyramids with his elephants going, if there's no way, we will make one. And they proceeded to, go up the mountains with what is reported they used it to break away the rocks is vinegar and salt, and hacking a path from the Rhone up to the Pyrenees of France into Italy. Anyway, so in the book Harold Lamb, we find the name of this woman, Emelise. And he is in shock. And I had to convince him. I said, we've read all the books. We've bought books. We've bought ancient shit on Carthage, on Punic Wars, on Hasdrubal, your father in that time. Holy fuck. That's her name. That's the universe saying, yeah, that's who you are. And for a long time, he couldn't believe it. Or maybe I should say he didn't want to believe it. And remember, we're in our 20s. And there's not a lot of support. There's not a lot of hypnotherapists that are famous or infamous or whatever that could give us guidance. The only person that was really out there in the world, that was really making moves and shaking and showing the world about psychic energy and past life regression and memory, was Sylvia Browne. So he was coming to a place in his, at this point we're in our late 20s, to a place of, okay, that was me. And then I didn't know it because I wasn't wise enough then, or I didn't understand enough then. And of course, these jobs, having one job, two jobs to have you survive, you can't really sit and meditate and ponder and get downloads for higher guidance. Not then. It wasn't happening to that level then. But he got to a place of shame and massive regret, which I never really understood because I didn't see it yet. And so one day, his mother gave us tickets to a Sylvia Browne event. And in that event, and this is where you'll see my video on soul retrieval guided meditation, The Doors. It was from Sylvia Browne. So she would do group guided meditations, and with her son, Chris, would pull out people from the audience to do it right on the stage. It was a beautiful area. It was done somewhere, I'm trying to remember where, but it was like a rotunda, and it was an absolutely beautiful venue, venue that had been built in the 1800s. It was absolutely gorgeous and so apropos to what she was doing. So in the guided meditation, you walk down the hallway and you open a door. Whichever door opens, a life will come out. In other words, a past life will expose itself to you, and then you've got to deal with it. And so we did that. And what he saw was that he was a Roman. There was no doubt. He said there was a Roman, and he had hair on his arms, and he was hairless. My husband, and he had hair on his arms, and black hair, and he was wielding a sword, and there was blood everywhere, and there was carnage, and it was just, and he kind of abruptly jumped and opened his eyes to get out of that memory. So as we moved from San Francisco to Los Angeles, we devoured every book you can imagine. We'd go to antique stores and buy books from the 1800s on the ancient histories and so on and so forth, and continue to, look at what else he needed to understand, including the fact that I had been his brother in that past life, and we were generals, basically, or I was under his command. And he had a massive guilt because one of the ways that apparently ended for me was that I was trapped by Romans, and I went into the battlefield like, fuck it, I don't give a shit. This is it. This is the last stand. And of course, to my demise. And they were able to remove my head from my body and throw it over to the gates of Hannibal's place. And he could not believe that he had failed his little brother because I was younger than him. What was interesting, and I need to back up because in the Punic Wars, and this is important when you remember past lives, because there's a lot of shit, there's a lot of sacrifice, human sacrifice throughout the Romans, the Celts, and the Carthaginians. That was just, and as you know, South America, lots of human sacrifice. So Hasdrubal, who was his father at the time, with the first Punic Wars, which was the Romans, made Hannibal a pact. He made this little 8-9-year-old boy to make a pact on the human sacrifice that were going on a pit fire, and to say that he would use his last breath, he would use every metal, every might to conquer and destroy Rome for what they have done to the Carthaginians. And so basically my husband's whole incarnation in that life was to become a war machine. And so in the end, and this is where the red, white, and blue team, over there in red, white, and blue, you get what I'm saying? The flag that we're sending billions to. The Hannibal Directive comes from, which is like the biggest piece of shit that they would do to that memory. But the Hannibal Directive is based on the fact they'll never take hostages, which is not what Hannibal did. Hannibal, by the time he lost the Punic Wars, as you know, you probably know this by now, was in exile for probably 12, 15 years, and decided that the best thing to do was to take his own life through poison, okay, instead of being captured. And he was in his 60s when he did that. So that is from the Hannibal Directive. That's what they've coined, that a person taking their life not to be captured. Because if you've ever studied Roman history at all, even a little, you'll know that when the Romans took captives, this is why Cleopatra took herself out. When the Romans took captive, it wasn't a big it didn't last like an hour, 2 hours of torture. It lasted years, years and years and years. And they would display you, and they would do what they call a triumph parade, and they would display you in chains, walking defeated. And if you were a queen, a king, a general, a conqueror, whatever, that was the last thing you wanted to do, is end up like that. So the ones who knew enough to say, yeah, I'm out. So how this impacted him was the following. He would get opportunities, because he was a beautiful looking man, opportunities for acting, opportunities for becoming a pilot, opportunities for all kinds of things. And he would do it, but then he would do something to sabotage it. In the end, what he started doing was working a job door to door, salesman door to door. And I feel like crying when I say that, because this kind of job of door to door, he did for like 10, 15 years. I would say 15 years. And he would come to me and say, today I've knocked on 100 doors. And I just feel like every time they open their door, I'm saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And what he was saying I'm sorry to is, I'm sorry I harmed you in these battles. I'm sorry I conquered your village. He really felt in his whole entire body that he owed the debt. He owed the debt not to win in this life, though he had been given every gift you can imagine a man is given. A beautiful face, a tall, strong, powerful body, psychic gifts, and other gifts. He could have had and done anything. But instead, he felt he owed the duty to one by one apologize to souls he felt like he was divinely guided to. And that's why he kept working this job. He felt as if he was paying karma. And by the time I understood that this was, I understood it by the time I was older, but I couldn't articulate to him the right words I could have said to him, for example, today. And so when you are given these past lives, whether they're famous or not, it's not to trap you in the jail of your own guilt and shame. It's to show you the contrast from where you've come and to where you are. It's also to show you that you've been able to lead or originate or invent or create, right? That is its only purpose. It's not there to jail you. When a past life comes to you out of nowhere that's horrific, where you see yourself doing things and you were powerful and you abused your power. I have a past life like that I remembered. And it helped me. It helped me realize that I had very brutally abused power indiscriminately for my own pleasures, for my own whatever. And the only reason why it came to me was because it was showing me why I was afraid of my power. And Nick was afraid of his power. He was magnetic and charismatic, and he was afraid of his power. Adding to that he had been most likely, and there's no doubt in my mind, molested as a child because of his beauty when he was very, very young, like 3-4 years old. That also added to the shame and the root chakra. And so instead of the past life delivering him, it chained him. So it's really important that when you seek past life memories, that you're very careful, or you work with a hypnotherapist, or if you're doing it on your own, because many of you are gifted enough to do it on your own, that you realize what it is and what you need to do, which is literally release it, forgive yourself, and let it go. And do that again and again until it no longer jails you. It's really that simple. No past life coming to you is there to harm you. It was never meant to harm him. The fact that he said the word Imalise, which she's mentioned once, and just to give you some comparison, Alexander the Great's horse was named Bucephalus. It is known, it is written again and again. So a horse was more famous than a woman. And she came from Spain, on the side note. And so nothing was written about her except in that book, which was the universe saying, you're not crazy, this is who you are, deal with it. And for years, I never spoke of it because people have this weird thing about famous past lives, like they're more important than other lives. This idea that, what if one of you was Cleopatra? What if one of you was Nefertiti? What if one of you was Eleanor of Aquitaine or Joan of Arc? Honestly, who gives a shit at the end? What am I supposed to learn from this life? Take off the fame thing and ask yourself, what do I have to learn? Why, of all lives, because you've had thousands, of all lives I've had, why would I remember this one? Why is this one being offered? From a mundane life of a fisherman to a life of a little boy dying of whooping cough, to a life as an Andromedan, deciding to take on the incarnation of a humanoid to experience it, and then falling from 6D consciousness to 3D, like boom. Why are these important? Why is this being brought to me? And what if I did something wrong? Some of you guys were some of those, if you go to the Aztec, the Mayans who were doing human sacrifice. In other words, this is something, sadly, that was taught to us by Anunnakis. Okay? For purposes. So if you listen to David Icke and his take on this shit, you'll understand why that was taught to us. The Lemurians were a very, very gentle people. Absolutely unwarring race of people. And then they were the first peoples, if you will. And then came the Atlanteans. And they were okay to a point until they started developing factions to conquer. For what? I don't fucking know. Because what more can you conquer when you're abundant? But factions grew. Greed, avarice, and a warring energy started to be birthed that collided with the Lemurians and pretty much wiped them out. So my point is, what if you remember you're an Atlantean that did that? Right? What if you remember that you were a sorcerer in Atlantis doing all kinds of fuckery, or you were in the lab doing all kinds of weird genetic manipulation? What's your takeaway? Your takeaway is, I'm not that person anymore. Your takeaway is, I forgive myself, and I was in a different consciousness that is so not me. It is not who I am. I will never do that again. I could never do that again. I'm not wired that way anymore. That's the takeaway. And the reason they show you that is because it is an undercurrent of energy, of shame, of grief, of regret. It's an undercurrent. And when they know that it's an undercurrent, that it's tying you up, it's like articulated. You don't know what's wrong. And sometimes you cry, right? Some of you cry and go, I don't know why I'm crying. Yeah, you're releasing somatic shit. And so you cry, and you're like crying and crying and going, God, this is so stupid. Why am I crying? Because you're somatically releasing shit you can't articulate. Some of it is from this life. Some of it is from those past lives. So when the guardians of the Akashic bring you downloads that may horrify you, don't reject it. Sit with it and go, why is this here? What am I to learn from that? And then immediately start the work of forgiveness and releasing all of it. That's why they're bringing it to you. They're saying, there's some shit that you're not, there's a shackle around your ankle. You can't even see it. So we're going to tell you what it is. We're going to show you what that shackle is. And then we're going to give you the key to that shackle so you can literally walk away from that and let it go. And leave it behind. We'll dissolve it. Okay? We'll transmute that energy for you. But the reason why we're bringing you this past life, or maybe there's a pattern, okay, is so that you understand that this undercurrent that's preventing you from ascending is there. And you need to look at it, and you need to handle your business. And that's the only reason why it comes. It's not there to shame you, harm you, or trap you. And because we were busy working and surviving and paying rent and doing all of the fucking mundane things that this 1% has decided to entrap us on this hamster wheel. We weren't able to do the kinds of things like, for example, grounding. He needed, if I could take it all back in our 20s, we would have gone to parks, to nature, and grounded, and gone into the woods, into the forest, into maybe camping for 3 or 4 days in silence, for him to process it, for him to purge it, for him to maybe even go through a dark night of the soul for a month or 2 or more to release it. But there was none of that. None of that. He was my high-level soulmate, still is. But this is one of the problems that, for example, high-level soulmate couples and twins, twin flame, twin rays, have. It's this undercurrent of some of these past lives that are not being revealed, that are creating this runner-chaser or this I'm not worthy, you could do better than me, you're better off without me. And it sends you into a tailspin of dark night of the soul because you're like, I can't breathe without you. And your twin is so fucking hell-bent on losing and they have no idea what they're doing to you. And they have no idea why they're doing it to you, most importantly. Because of these undercurrent of past life traumas, of things done under a pact, a bond. You could call it a curse if you want. That's probably the only time I'll say yeah, because I never say yes to that. Usually it's just generational trauma. But this, yeah, that would be what you call a past life moment. Can you imagine doing that to a 9-year-old? While people are being, thrown in pits of fire, whatever the fuck. Yeah, that marks a child. And then his end of taking his own life, because there was no other, he was trapped. He was like a wolf trapped in the corner. So at the end of the day, I'm not saying this to you to make you afraid of excavating your past lives. I'm giving you this to tell you what could be ahead of a past life excavation. And not to be afraid, and to get and just get in the mud, like go in, all in, cannonball right into it, cannonball. Now we had, excuse me, magical occurrences. Me and my husband, me and Nick. So Nick and I remember we were sitting at a kitchen table. We were living in San Francisco, and an orb, 3-pointed flame orb, of all the colors of a flame, orange, red, gold, this, that, and the other. No blues in it. All of these orange colors. We saw it coming from the garden. The door was open, the screen door was open, and it came, and we had been arguing about a point that was just mundane and stupid. And it was levitating. It was like literally levitating between us, like right between us, on eye level. And our mouths dropped, you can imagine. And we're like, we couldn't even speak. And we saw it then move out of our realm and go out into the garden and then go straight up. And then we turned to, did you fucking see it? What the fuck was that? We were like, what was that? What was that? Did you see that? And we started describing it to each other. We were in our 20s. In our 30s, we would take long walks. We would go to bookstores that were open until midnight. We would, I mentioned this in the book Recall. If you've ever read the book Recall, my book, which is it's a creative nonfiction, I talk about how we walk into Cliff's bookstore. But anyway, that night, we were taking a walk, and Nick loved his cigars. He would do a Pleiades cigars. He, by the way, just on the side note, at the age of 10, 1972, he would say that he came from the Pleiades, that he did not come from here. So he was a starseed, and he knew it as a child. Now remember, 1972, no one's talking about, babies aren't talking about how they're from the Pleiades or Andromedans, or none of that shit is happening. It's 1972. None of that shit is happening. Public schools are what they are. And there's no social media. And there's absolutely no information on this. There's a lot of Hindus that are coming out of India with their knowledge. Like the Beatles have brought in some of these Maharaj, and it's the beginnings of these consciousness, okay? But the hippie generation, Vietnam is still going on. It's about to end, I believe. And here he is as a little kid, 10, saying, I'm from the Pleiades, I don't come from here. And his mother confirmed that. So we're walking down this little streets, we called it the little streets in Pasadena, California. And I see a man tall, in a lumberjack. It looks like a Pendleton flannel shirt, boots, jeans. And he's like casually leaning against the tree, but he's not a man, he's a ghost. And we walk past the tree. I see it. I see Nick's face tilted towards the left, where the man is up against the tree. And because we've been trained, all of us, not just me and him, all of us, to ignore what we saw, we went maybe 2 steps beyond the tree. Then we turned. Did you fucking just see that man? Yes. And we went back right to the tree, 2 steps back. There was nothing there. And Nick, having Native American blood, said, I think I'm going to give an offering to the tree. And so he took his cigar and broke it into pieces and scattered the tobacco around the tree as an offering to this ghost apparition, whatever you want to call it. So I could tell you more stories, but the point is, he was psychic. He saw things that I saw. And I didn't have to convince him that this was here or that was there. So definitely a very important beloved in my life, but a very tortured beloved, a very humble, absolutely humble beloved. He was a gentle giant, but incredibly strong, and knew his power, knew he could, because of his power and his height, he could scare the shit out of people. So he was very aware of that, and he was very careful. And he was very, I would say on many levels, wounded, but there was honor in him, in honoring other, people. And the thing that he suffered with me was that he felt as if he had failed me. And because he wanted to, and this is where karma, somebody else's karma can impact you, because he wanted to lose, okay? And he didn't feel like he deserved abundance. It began to become a weight on my life. And imagine when you're somebody who doesn't want to win, you're not going to win either. Because when they mess up, you have to clean up. And so your karma can be very good. But if their karma is good, but they decide to go against it, they will have tower moments and death moments and transformations that are very volatile and very upsetting to the balance of the desire to have peace. The opposite of peace keeps coming up and becomes a norm. And so what happened is after 33 years of marriage, that's what destroyed the marriage. I couldn't do it anymore. And I left somebody who I've really loved. And women often, and that's what men don't understand, women will tell you again and again and again and again. And then one day they're silent. So the dream that made me realize I needed to leave was a dream that's kind of gross, but it's a dream where I dreamed that Nick was standing in front of me and he had worms coming out of his nose, like the skin of his nose, worms coming out of his cheeks. And I was trying to tell him, you have worms coming out, but it felt as if I was yelling underwater. Can you imagine the frustration of yelling underwater? And I kept telling him, you've got this in front of your face. Could you please look at it? And he would not. He refused to hear me. And I remember waking up with frustration and then an amazing sense of sadness, just pure sadness. I told him about the dream. I said, I point things out to you that are right in front of your nose and you won't see it. You refuse to see it. And a year continued until finally it was time to call it a day with the marriage. So these past lives have a lot of potency. And what you do with them will not only impact yourself, but those around you. And it's very, very important that the most important thing you can do when you start excavating your past lives, this is not to scare you, it's just to fucking tell you what's going on, because you're either going to stay in 3D in ignorance, or you're going to excavate shit, and sometimes you excavate shit you didn't expect to excavate. It's that simple. And so you have to forgive. If you do nothing else, you have to forgive yourself and others. That's the only thing that you need to do. And eventually, the energy of that vibration of that past lives will be transmuted. And its hold on you will be completely, utterly dissolved. By the time Nick died, whatever he did, he was able to dissolve it. Because when he died, his hands were in mudras. And that's complete surrender. And it took him 2 minutes to die, about probably 2 minutes to die, which is it's a good way to die. Believe me, when you watch people who are ill with cancer and shit like that, yeah, that's so for those of you who go, oh my God, I never got to say goodbye, believe me, that's your ego. They're the best thing that can happen. It's a shock, don't get me wrong. I mean, I howled to the wind when I heard he had passed. And I kind of knew he was going when my son called me to say they're trying to save him. I knew he was gone. I already knew he wasn't going to come back. There was no reason to, and I knew why. And that's private. But I'm going to tell you something. That is the most beautiful situation for someone. Because when they stay, like my mother did, like my twin did, they're working out a lot of shit in their head. Apparently, Nick had done all the work already, and he was able to fly home. But when people stay, sometimes it's because you've got shit to work out with them. There's unfinished soul contracts, and you better do your work and hurry up. And whatever the fuck you need to do with that person that's sitting in bed and suffering, okay? You better do your work fast so you can release them, and as a mercy, if you will. And then the person hopefully is going to work out their stuff. And that's what I kept telling my twin, is you've got to forgive yourself and forgive others. Once you've done the work, you will be released. I had to tell him that because that was the truth. So I hope this helped. I want to see if you have any questions or comments. And go from there. Hang on for a quick second. Let me see if there's any. It's good to see you, love, light, spirit. It's really good. Any comments? I see actually no comments. That's wild. Am I blind? Am I blind? Any comments? Did anybody comment and I didn't see? Because I don't look down. Okay, beautiful message. Thank you. A narcissistic father did the past life regression, visited a lifetime in Egypt where it all started. Very cool. Very, very cool. A narcissistic father. That's excellent. Yeah, Egypt was wrought with all kinds of narcissistic, if you really think about it, a lot of narcissistic behaviors with the priests in Egypt were fucked up. When Nefertiti and I'm trying to remember how to pronounce his name, Akhenaten. When Akhenaten, to go to Egypt, to leave. I forgot which part of Egypt they were in. Upper Nile, I don't remember. But I remember seeing a documentary on them moving the whole of their populace into a different area, away from the monks, not the monks, the priests, and their beliefs of all the gods, crocodile faces and Horus and all these. And they were praying to one god, the one god, Ra, right? And so they had created a whole kind of beautiful golden age for Egypt. And then the shit hit the fan because the priests were pissed off. So there was a lot of like manipulation and power control. And I keep calling them monks. The priests were not always good people. I had a past life with my twin, and he actually was a priest. And I'm not sure if I was a concubine or his lover, but I remember us in that past life, and I felt the vibration of, how do I put it? It was the arrogance and entitlement from that period. Because, again, you have to understand that that particular sector of class system with the priests is they controlled everything, including the royal families, the dynasties. And they looked down on all the plebs, all the peasants, if you will. And they knew it was outside of that world. Their world was, because the Greeks would come and visit. And they thought of everyone else as barbarians, to be honest. A lot of the pantheon of Greek mythology is directly from the Egyptian gods. So, and then, it distills from there, right? But anyway, any questions or comments? I'm going to be going in a minute. Let me see. Let me read this. I have my over something to do with the government. My father, you mean the process? Wow. Good morning. Will this be posted on YouTube? I just got up and I just came in. Yes. I'm grateful for you explaining the points of past life regression and how to work with what you find, the need to integrate and heal and forgiveness. Tell me why I tingle when I think of a particular person. I don't care. Being placed, not right now. It's not the time. All right. So does anybody have any other questions? The beginnings. So this was the first time I shared about this really famous. It's actually one of the greatest generals that ever lived, besides Alexander the Great. And all of you might have this weird idea that that it would be somebody like, I'm just going to throw you a name, a Trump or Kennedy that would have that past life. No, you understand, some of us carry power from past lives and we are nameless in the crowds. There's a great movie called The City of Angels. Great fucking movie with Meg Ryan and Nicolas Cage. And the reason why it's great isn't because of Nicolas Cage and Meg Ryan. There's a scene of a man who's fat and slovenly, and he's doing a barbecue. He's talking to Nicolas Cage, who's still an angel. And he shares with him how he fell and why he fell to be with the woman he loved. And so we have this idea that we have to be Marie Antoinette, to be Joan of Arc, to be these famous Nefertiti or other Napoleon or other names of fame, that we have to somehow still be famous, to still be. No, quite often we come back and we hold the vibration of these past lives that were heavy with duty and heavy with expectation and heavy with regret and heavy with guilt and heavy with I should have done this and that, and it's all there, and we just want peace. So one of the things I remember, and I will share this with you, that Nick said quite often, and I remember that. And in my poem "You," which I'd written about my my twin, but there's a line I say about having an easy life, taking a woman, having children, and having peace. And I remember Nick quite often saying, I didn't want anything. I just wanted peace. I didn't want to do that because I have that still in me. And that was something he feared, that he had that still in him, that conqueror, but with the ability to gather, erect a tag team of men. Most of the people that followed Hannibal weren't just Carthaginians. They were Africans. They were French. They were Italian. They loved him. And something that the Romans resented, because they had to hire mercenaries to add to their, sometimes they had to add a team of mercenaries, right, to add to their legions. But Hannibal did not. They would actually join him. And part of the reason is because he would not ask them something he would not do himself. That was something. And so once Nick came to peace with knowing that that had been his life, he realized that, and it terrified him, that he had that in him, that he could actually create chaos and havoc. But what's nice, what I know for a fact, is that he's returned to the Pleiades. And he's not coming back here. There's no reason for that. And I feel like he's completely released all some scars, impressions from those lives. One of the things I didn't share with you when he was a Roman leader. I'm not sure if he was a general or a captain, lieutenant. I don't know. He didn't know. But I remember him, and I was his Roman wife, and I remember actually the scene of the courtyard with the open roof and this water that was on the bottom, and he treated me as an equal. And he had dreamed, this is him as a Roman leader, he had dreamed of a weapon that could mass destroy people. And he had designed the schematics, and he had shown it to me and said, if I release this weapon, Rome will be even more powerful than it ever was. And he had decided in that life not to do it. So he was a Roman after he was Hannibal, and then he became a Roman incarnation. We started kind of tracking the timelines, and we could see it. And so he decided that what he knew he would not use to destroy further. But he was still under the umbrella of 3D, meaning couldn't see beyond the 3D, but had enough integrity and compassion not to use tools to mass destruct. So one of the fears that he had in this incarnation, that he had this personality, some scars still in him. I don't think he realized that it was asking him to use that power to lead people into the light, not to use war as the tool, but to use light as the tool. And I'm starting to realize now that that was what he was being asked to do. You have done this. You have done a great feat to inspire men to follow you into battle. You can inspire people into the light. And he never got that message. I think by the time he got it, it was too late, and he dropped his body. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Beth, thank you for saying what you said. Is my book Recall still available? Yes, it's on my Linktree, on my profile. You can go and buy it. And it's been available. It's it's always going to be available. But it's on my Linktree. It says Recall. And you'll see an eye, a beautiful woman's eye with a couple sleeping in each other's arms. And it's right there. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. It's actually Nick's wisdom. Thank you for your lesson there. Truly invaluable. Thank you for sharing. Tell me, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and upload this. Have no fear. And I'm going to go. I got to run. But I want to send you so much love on your journey. Please don't be afraid. Please. Last thing that these downloads are for is to make you afraid. It's to release you from the shackles you don't even know you have. And then once you know what they are, it's fucking done. You're done. And you can move into this incarnation with absolute power and light. All light. Only light. Trust me. And love. All right. Sending you much love on your journey. Namaste.